So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shireen Ash. I'm a librarian at the Corte Madera Library, and I'm very happy to welcome you to today's topic, Growing Strawberries and Blueberries, brought to you by Judy Orsini, a Marin Master Gardener. Really excited to have Judy give this presentation. It's one I've wanted to hear for a very long time, so I'm sure you guys want to hear it too. So just before we get started, I'd ask that everyone stay muted throughout the program. You'll have the opportunity to put your questions in the chat and I will read them out. Judy's going to talk about strawberries first, and then we'll have Q&A about that, and then blueberries and a Q&A about that, and then a little bit of wrap up, a couple remaining slides. This program is being recorded, and it is typically up within 2 weeks, barring any technical difficulties. It will be available on the Marin County Free Library YouTube channel so that you can review it or share it with friends. It will live there. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. With that, we can get started. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Judy Orsini is a master gardener. She was a landscape architect and became a UC Marin Master Gardener in 2015. Judy performs garden walks for homeowners, giving advice related to water use and what plants to choose. Judy participates in the Exploring Habitat program for school children. She grows her own edibles in the Mill Valley Bayfront Community Garden. I'm really thrilled to have her here today. So with that, I will disappear and Judy will tell us all about strawberries and blueberries. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, I too appreciate you coming today because I know it's a gorgeous day out there and we've had so very few nice days. It was hard for anybody to come in today indoors to listen to a Zoom presentation. So thank you. So yes, Master Gardeners. We provide research-based information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. This season, we will have information booths like this one pictured here at several of the Marin farmer markets. We also have an office in Novato where Master Gardeners will respond to your phone calls, your email messages, and even in-person questions about anything related to home gardening. We also have a website with more information than you could ever need and a newsletter that you can sign up for. And I'll be providing more information on those at the end of my presentation. See if my no, okay. So I decided to leave this slide in from an older presentation only because I think that the strawberry Santa Clauses are kind of cute. So bear with me for a minute or two. I'd like to share a little side information about the source of the berries that you buy at the grocery store. As of 2018, Driscoll's, which is a fourth-generation family-owned business, controlled more than a third of the entire U.S. berry market and over 60% of the organic strawberry market. They grow berries in 21 countries. It all began in the 1860s when the first commercial strawberries were grown in the Watsonville area and delivered by freight trains, like the one shown on the right. The first variety sold was named Sweetbriar. In 1950, the Driscoll Strawberry Association patented their first variety, which was bred to extend the season and the shipping distance. 30 years later, they expanded to outside the US and introduced blackberries, blueberries, and even golden raspberries. Cuttings are grown in a germ-free screenhouse, then planted in fields, and after several years, the seedlings are harvested, packed, and shipped to coolers to keep them in hibernation until independent farmers can pick them up to plant. Strawberries take 30 days to mature from flower to fruit and are planted annually by the commercial growers. New cultivars are constantly being developed based, unfortunately, more for berry color, shape, and firmness, and not so much for flavor. Even before this year, with inflation that we've been experiencing, the prices of strawberries had been rising dramatically, due primarily to a decline in immigration and minimum wage and overtime laws. So if you are a true berry lover like myself, I encourage you to grow your own. There are 3 cultivars of strawberries, plus natives that you may even find growing wild in your yard, and which are eaten more by Europeans than Americans because they are smaller with less commercial value. Each cultivar has a different time and duration of fruiting, as implied by some of these names. Day neutrals are sometimes referred to as everbearing because they produce fruit throughout the growing season, not just in early summer. June bearing strawberries are the most common because they grow one large bountiful crop in the early summer. I should also mention that some June bearing strawberries are referred to as short day because they can be grown during the winter in places like California and Florida when the days are shortest. Crops generally occur over several weeks in May into June, historically in June, hence the moniker. Varieties are classified as early season, mid-season, and late season. You can prolong your harvest season by planting varieties that produce during these different parts of the season. And some plant catalogs, like Burpee, sell sets of 3 varieties to take the guesswork out of this for you. So June bearing strawberries, there's usually no crop the very first year, but they produce berries for the next 3 to 4 years because they generate numerous rumors that can become new plants. Day neutral strawberries produce fruit throughout the growing season, which is why day neutral strawberries are often referred to or classified as everbearing. For this presentation, any reference to everbearing strawberries includes the day neutral ones. Day neutral strawberries produce fruit the same year that they're planted, but only for 1, maybe 2 years. They have 3 peak periods of fruiting, usually in May or June, mid-July, and late August into September. They continuously produce as long as it's less than 90 degrees. And they are generally treated as annuals and replanted each year, as the commercial growers do. But the fruit are not as large as the June bearing, and the yields are generally smaller. They also produce fewer runners. So everbearing strawberries produce berries in the late spring through the fall. Everbearing plants have more modest-sized crops than the June bearing, but they can start producing as soon as there is about 12 hours of daylight. They lack the productivity and the quality of day neutrals, with a few exceptions. And the old cultivars are not as widely available today. And then there's the alpine strawberry. These are small but tasty berries that you can get all summer. They tolerate light shade and have some ornamental value. They're not grown, well, they weren't grown commercially in the US for consumption for a long time, but now they seem to be more and more available. The Territorial Seed Company, if you happen to know who they are, sells an Italian alpine variety with numerous miniature and flavorful berries that can be planted in rock gardens and pots and a rainbow treasure variety with multi-hued blooms suitable for hanging baskets. So they're clearly, cultivating some new ones of interest. June-bearing varieties, I've got a lot of them listed here. As I said, companies are constantly breeding new varieties. This is just a sampling, so you may not find all of these available at your nursery, and you're likely to see some additional ones that aren't here. I've got these listed by, whether they're early, mid-season, or late season. So if you want a more continuous supply, then plant a variety of these according to their season of production. Everbearing. Here's a list of some of them, and probably the most well-known is the Albion. It's cultivated because it's a long, conical, firm, sweet, disease-resistant variety that is very popular. And you can see by some of these other names that many of these are cultivars that come from the local area down there in the Salinas Valley. But I'm not going to go through each one of these. So the important thing is planting them in the right spot. You want to avoid planting them where potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers have been grown. These particular plants belong to the same family, Solanaceae, which are highly susceptible to a fungus called verticillium wilt. Many cultivars are resistant to it, but none are totally immune. I'll talk more about diseases and pests as we get through this presentation. You also don't want to plant strawberries where they have been grown for more than several years, because there could be disease in the soil from previously grown strawberries. You also want to avoid former lawns, as there may be grubs, and obviously extremely weedy sites. You can try solarizing if you have a lot of weeds in advance, if you want. Solarization basically means laying down some plastic, a colored plastic, and leaving it there for several months to help kill the weeds that are in the soil. So strawberries need at least 8 to 10 hours of direct sunlight. And if you're having to choose between mostly morning or afternoon light, locate the plants where morning light will quickly dry off the plants. You want gentle slope is most ideal for air circulation, but obviously a lot of gardens are level. Your soil should be fertile, sandy soils with good drainage and organic matter. You can prepare the beds by deeply digging in about 1 inch of compost and 5 pounds of bone meal per 100 square feet of garden. If planting in pots, mix in about 1/4 cup of complete fertilizer per plant. The soil pH can range from about 5.0 to 7.5, but there's this little window of 5.5 to 6.5 that's the best. And our soils tend to be at the higher end, up around 6.5, 7 or so. And your soil only needs to be about 6 to 8 inches deep to grow strawberries. So when to plant depends on the type of strawberry you're growing. June bearing can be planted at the end of the summer after the temperatures begin to cool and into November, but not when soils are saturated by winter rains. June bearers will produce fruit the following year. Now is the time to plant the everbearing. That is, if it ever stops raining. And everbearing will produce fruit summer through fall of the year that they're planted. You can buy healthy bare root plants or container plants in the spring, or you can propagate runners from the healthy mother plants in the fall. I'll talk more about propagation. I should mention that strawberry plants from catalogs are typically shipped around this time of year, mid-March. Trim off any brown or damaged top growth and any straggly roots. Store in the shade or in the refrigerator until you're ready to plant them. Soak the roots before planting, but the important thing is don't let them dry out. Dig the holes as deep as the roots, but don't cram them in. Cover the soil, but do not bury the crown, which I'll show you a picture of in just a minute. And don't set the plants in individual depressions or on top of mounds. Water well and cover with an organic mulch, but not leaves, because leaves can carry disease. Organic mulches that I'd recommend are peat, straw, cocoa bean hulls, and very fine wood chips, but not leaves. Or you can just use colored plastic sheeting. I have an aversion to plastic myself, and you may also, but if not, there are some advantages of using plastic sheeting, like what the commercial growers use. It helps warm the soil. It helps plants to grow in cooler weather, promotes fruit ripening, and minimizes weeds, snails, slugs, and decay. So here's a picture of a plant showing the crown, basically that area between the leaves and the roots. Set a strawberry plant neither deeper nor shallower than it was growing before it was dug up. That's the key thing to remember. So there's really no right or wrong way to plant strawberries, but it is suggested that for June bearers, you plant them in rows, setting the plants 18 to 24 inches apart in rows that are about 3 to 4 feet apart. And the reason why is because that allows the runners to spread and root into your mulch, forming dense beds over several years. Or for the everbearing, you might try the hill system. You can plant them a little bit closer together in rows that are closer. Clipping the runners may extend the productivity of the mother plant. Otherwise, they may be good for only 1 year and treated as annual plants. You can plant strawberries more densely in raised beds closer together. And if you use containers, they're actually best to use if your soils are really poor, space or sun is limited, so you can move the containers around, sort of following the sun, or if slugs are an extreme problem. And there's lots of different things that they make today for growing strawberries, including pyramid planters, hanging baskets, strawberry pots like this one, and even grow bags. It's worth noting, though, that if you grow them in containers, your productivity is generally lower than in a garden, primarily because the runners are not free to grow out, spread out, and root. If you do container planting, the potting soil can be shallow with pebbles underneath. I've even used those styrofoam packing peanuts underneath my soil. It reduces the weight of the pots, and your water requirements are lower. Optionally, you can wrap the root bundles with damp newspaper to tuck into the small openings, and if possible, mulch. There are options for getting enough water evenly to your roots. You can mix water-absorbing crystals into the soil, or insert a perforated pipe down the middle, or even place a perforated jug on top and let the water slowly leak in. During the growing season, Feed your plants with a diluted, balanced fertilizer. Caring for your strawberries. You want to water them regularly, about an inch or so per week, which basically means watering 2, maybe 3 times a week, depending on how dry and hot it is. You want to ramp up your watering when the berries begin to enlarge. Keep your soil moist but not soggy, and the best way to do that is to use a drip irrigation system or a soaker hose. Feed your June bears after planting and again in late summer. The ever-bearing feed monthly throughout the summer. Those are the ones that are producing berries all the time. Use organic nitrogen-rich fertilizers. Some of the best fertilizers include seaweed, fish emulsion, blood, bone, or feather meal. They're all high in nitrogen. It's advised to snip off the flower buds of the June-bearing plants the entire first year. And for ever-bearing plants, just do this only until July 1st. Pinch off the runners, and then all but a few. If you're concerned about frost, you can use straw or newspaper or even like a cover fabric. And put a little mulch down every couple of weeks on your plants. Pinching off the flower buds, by the way, and the runners keeps the plants more productive. So the renovation of the June bears is very important. You do not want to renovate ever-bearing. Just expect to replace these every year or 2. But the renovation of the June bears will help produce larger fruit. Begin immediately after the first harvest and perform annually. Remove the weeds, narrow the rows, thin the plants. Select the strongest, which are going to be probably the youngest runner plants for propagation, and remove the mother plants, which are already a year old. And then shear the plants close to the ground. Fertilize and water, and believe me, your plants will rebound and become more productive. Just to mention, you probably may already know this, but the runner plants are also called plantlets or daughter plants. And after the harvest season, the original or mother plants become less productive, much less productive. So if you have the space in your garden, you can let your June bears send out their runners and spread out. They will root and produce berries the next year. But if you want to relocate your plantlets, then this is one of the things that you can do for handling them. Sink small pots into the soil under the runners and weight or peg them down so the plantlets rest on the soil in the pots. Cut off the extra runners and the runners that extend from the plantlets. Then once rooted, sever the mother plant and lift the pot out of the ground. Using the pots helps to protect the roots when you're ready to remove the plantlets from the garden, but it isn't necessary if you're careful. It usually takes 4 to 6 weeks for the runners to root. So by mid-October, remove the plants from the pots and shake off the soil. You can store the bare root plants in plastic bags in the refrigerator for about 2 weeks and then plant in early November. Or, as I said, you can just replant them elsewhere in the garden when they've grown new roots. So these are some of the fungal diseases that affect strawberries, and it can be very discouraging sometimes. It's best to try buying disease-resistant cultivars rather than planting runners. The use of straw mulch providing sufficient sunlight, good air circulation, and well-drained soil will help prevent a lot of these diseases. And don't plant them where other plants have been affected in the past, as I mentioned, and relocate after 2 to 4 years. Adequately space your plants and pinch off the leaves and the runners. As I said, use drip irrigation or soaker hoses so that you aren't, getting the leaves wet all the time, and avoid excessive nitrogen. You need nitrogen, but not too much of it. And then discard immediately any affected dead fruit or foliage or any unhealthy looking foliage. And harvest every morning. So I will just mention that to control many of the diseases, Zonix biofungicide may be used. It's an organic foliar spray, which means you spray it onto the leaves, that kills disease spreading spores. It can be applied before the first signs of disease or even applied to the soil prior to planting. And again, that's Zonix biofungicide. This is a list of some of the insects, slugs and snails and other things that can be, and birds that can be very pesty. To avoid these problems, try to keep your fruit harvested right away and get rid of any affected fruit and foliage. Now, weevils, they will leave a ragged, chewed edge on your leaves in the springtime. You can go out at night with a flashlight and try to knock them off into a container. Be sure to kill them or discard them. And if that's not successful, you can try to remove afflicted plants and solarize the soil at the season's end or relocate them because they can live in the soil. Slugs, on the other hand, leave holes. Some people say that you can trap them with tin cans or deep pie plates or something like that, filled with beer. Supposedly they are attracted to the beer and they'll fall in and drown, but hasn't always proved to be successful. Or you can use copper barriers or scatter slug baits when you get really desperate. For the birds, use netting or chicken wire. If you use the plastic netting, try to anchor it down because the birds are pretty crafty at getting in underneath the netting. I should also mention, let me just go back for 1 second, that pyrethrin may also be used. It's a naturally occurring substance in chrysanthemum flowers, and it's considered an organic insecticide as long as it's not combined with synthetic substances. It targets the nervous system of insects. So unfortunately, that means that it can affect beneficial insects as well as the bad ones that you're trying to get rid of. So only use it as a last resort. How are we doing on time? Okay, in summary, June bears produce one big annual crop, but lots of runners, and are the most popular because the fruit is generally larger and tastier. But ever-bearing deliver berries throughout the summer. If you grow June bears, be sure to renovate them every year after the harvest and propagate the plantlets. And don't neglect your strawberry beds. Remove blossoms as recommended by type, as well as excessive runners and competing or older plants. Keep your soil moist and nutrient rich with compost and organic fertilizers. And when you pick them, leave the green caps on. So with that, I will take questions about the strawberries.
Great, and we have some. So
Okay.
Let me just get going. The first question is, can you recommend strawberries for Southern Marin in the Mill Valley area?
Most of these strawberries are grown down in the Salinas area, which gets a lot of fog, has a climate similar to ours. So any of those that have the name like Seascape or Albion, those are going to do fine here.
A similar question, but for West Marin in the San Geronimo Valley, what types of plants would you suggest growing there?
Well, that's kind of a similar climate to Mill Valley.
Okay, so the same.
Okay. But the best thing to do is when you're buying strawberries at the nursery, read the tags, and they'll usually kind of tell you what kind of how tolerant they are of certain climatic conditions.
Great. Good advice. Here's a question that I think is interesting. What about planting them in pots that have had strawberries grown in them previously? Is that an option?
Yes, you can do that. If you've had strawberries growing in those pots for several years, get all the soil out of there and put in fresh soil. If you've only had them in there for a year or two and your previous strawberries didn't show any signs of unhealthiness, then it's probably okay to just replant them in the soil. But be sure to add compost, because all fruit and vegetable plants that you grow in your garden use a lot of nutrients. So every year you need to replenish those nutrients.
Great, thank you. And someone asks, what about straw bale planting for strawberries? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. I've never done it myself. But yeah, I think it might actually help cut down on some of the problems of pests and possibly disease. But as I said, I haven't had any personal experience trying it. So that might be a good question for our help desk.
That's a great idea. Or this person could try it out and let you know.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a question came in about the recording, and I'll just reiterate that this talk will be available on the Marin County Free Library YouTube channel within 2 weeks. But now back to planting. Can you give us more advice about what is organic compost?
Oh, well, organic compost. It's best to buy, if you're going to be buying compost in a bag, look for the Omni, OMNI certification. If you're buying it from like a nursery or Martin Brothers or someplace like that, just make sure you buy it from a reputable place. But the best thing really, if you want to play it safe, is to buy it already bagged and make sure that that Omni certification is on the outside of the bag.
Okay, I put the certification information in the chat. Someone asked for any local nursery recommendations. I don't know if you want to answer that one, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, as a master gardener, we're not supposed to actually recommend any specific place. But we have a lot of good nurseries in the area.
Nicely done.
That's my PC response.
Yeah. So someone is following up asking, could you explain what is the Omni certification?
Well, it's an organization that does testing on a regular basis, and they have really strict requirements for something to qualify as being organic.
Okay, great. So at this point, those are all the questions we have related to strawberries. So I think we can feel comfortable moving on to blueberries.
Okay.
And there'll be a time for questions for blueberries too. Okay.
Yes. So here we have a basket full of blueberries. So for around here, the best type of blueberry to grow is the Southern High Bush variety. It's hybridized for superior fruit, soil adaptability, heat tolerance, and low winter chill requirements. Most, but not all blueberries need at least 800 hours of temperatures below 45 degrees during the dormant season, which is the winter season. So that's what winter chill requirements refers to, is that number of really cold hours. And of course, those can occur at night. So that's not hard to do around here to get those 800 hours. The berries ripen May through August, depending on the variety. And like strawberries, there are early, mid, and late season varieties. They are generally self-pollinating, but to get larger berries, plant 2 or more varieties close to one another. And for optimum pollination, varieties should have overlapping bloom windows. So here's a list of some of the southern high bush types. As with strawberries, horticulturists are constantly creating new hybrids. None of these were listed in last year's catalog that I consulted, except for the blue crop, which is the leading commercial variety in North America. They even breed varieties like pink popcorn that have, yes, pink berries. So they're getting more and more creative all the time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these other types. The northern high bush varieties are more suited to the colder climates in the northern US. And as you can see, the first 3 types reflect the ultimate size of the plants. The high bush can get quite big. And then there's the rabbit eye, which is an old cultivar that isn't even available in a lot of places. So similar to strawberries, blueberries require 6 to 8 hours or more of direct summer sunlight. They need good soil drainage, really essential. A sandy loam is preferable. You know, our soils around here are full of clay and don't drain all that well. So, you could consider, instead of amending your soil, planting them in a raised bed or even on a mound to create that better drainage. They do like acidic soil with the pH ranging from 3.8 to 5.5, but there's this sort of happy window in the middle. Your soil should contain a significant amount of organic matter. And to decrease the pH, because our soils tend to be a little on the high side, you can add powdered sulfur. It's best to add these amendments 6 to 12 months prior to planting, but if you forget to do it, don't worry about it. It's okay. They will do fine. And then, but one of the more important things is that blueberries do have shallow roots, so the plants are susceptible to drought. So during prolonged periods of drought or dryness, make sure, that your soils are kept moist. You can buy 1 to 3 year old disease-free plants. The larger the container, the older the plants, usually. Or you can buy bare root. Generally in the late winter, it's March, you might be able to find bare root, possibly still. But definitely you can get them in the containers by now. As I said, plant at least 2 varieties together for cross-pollination and to get the larger, earlier fruit. And then when you go to plant, there's a number of options. You can either mix peat, half peat with half soil, or you can add 1.5 cubic foot bag of high organic acidic planting mix in, or you can make your own using 3 parts sand, 3 parts sawdust or peat, and 2 parts of some kind of a leaf mold. The sawdust and leaf mold should be at least partially composted. You can also use coconut coir with gypsum or sulfur added to help acidify the soil. I kind of like coconut coir because it smells so good. So your container plants can be pruned up to 1/3 after you plant them. I know it's hard to do that, but the pruning actually reduces the transpiration while the roots adjust. So in the long run, it provides a benefit. Add 3 to 6 inches of organic acidic mulch. Again, mulch with rotted sawdust or peat, oak leaves, pine needles, bark, even spent hops or coffee grounds. Then a month later, in the early June, add about 1 ounce of acid fertilizer in a ring about 1 foot away from the trunk of your bush. But avoid nitrate fertilizers. Nitrate fertilizers are what promotes the green leaf growth, but not the fruiting. And evenly water about 1 inch per week. And you may need a little bit more water when fruit is actually developing. I should also mention that most nurseries sell many different kinds of acid-based fertilizers, just like fertilizers for citrus, for example. Remove any fruit buds and blossoms the first year or two to strengthen the branches. And that's a really hard thing for us gardeners to do. But in the long run, it will produce, it'll strengthen the branches and produce better fruit. Keep weed free, fertilize only twice during the growing season. You can fertilize in the early spring and then about a month later. And then as your plant, each year as your plant grows older, you can increase the fertilizer rate by about 1 ounce per year until the plant's about 8 years old, and then you can quit doing that. And add acidic mulch about every 1 to 3 years. That's probably one of the most important things to do. So, pruning. Blueberry plants reach maturity in 5 or 6 years. After that, then you can start pruning annually in the spring. Prune out the older canes and the smaller, weaker branches and canes about 20% per year. Ideally, each year you're going to prune out about 20% of the canes that should be about 1 inch in diameter at the base. About 20% are going to be larger than 2 inches, and the rest are going to fall in between. I have 3 blueberry plants growing in my garden, all different varieties, and my canes, my plants I know are at least 5 years old, and none of my canes are 2 inches in diameter. But that could be because I haven't pruned them enough in the past, or maybe my plants just simply get too much shade, and so they're not quite as vigorous. I'm not really quite sure. But anyway, plants should have about 15 to 20 healthy canes after 5 or 6 years. And blueberries are kind of interesting. I got asked this question one time, how long blueberries can live. And they can live to be a good 15 years or longer. So here are some of the disease and pests that blueberries can get. They can get a number of viruses and other diseases, but most nursery plants seem to have little problems here in our area. And as I said, I've had 3 blueberry plants in my garden for a number of years, and I've never had any of these problems. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, though. You just want to ensure that you have good drainage. You can use the sulfur sprays avoid really high nitrogen fertilizers, which if you buy fertilizers, there's usually 3 numbers. The first number is the nitrogen. Keep the air circulation good through pruning, remove affected leaves and canes when you happen to notice that there's some unhealthy ones. And as far as controlling aphids, thrips, leafhoppers, and nematodes, you can use a product called Clandestine. It is all organic. It's actually composed of ground crab and shrimp shells mixed with urea and made into granular pellets. It acts as a growth stimulator for good soil organisms. And then, of course, discard any severely infected plants. Mummyberry can be a real problem, but mostly in areas kind of like in the Midwest where you have really warm, humid weather. Not so much of a problem around here, although it could be a problem if you maybe like in places like Mill Valley and close to the coast where you get a lot of fog. The signs of it are the shoots will wilt, turn brown and die. A light colored mold may cover some of the blighted tissue. And then the fruit might turn pinkish and shrivel and fall off. One way to avoid it is to apply a urea fertilizer in the early spring. Blueberry maggots may be a problem. They're a close relative of the apple maggot. The berries become soft as white larvae eat the pulp. You can try using yellow sticky boards or these red spheres that help trap adult flies. You may or may not have success with those things. But for caterpillars, thrips, and spider mites, we recommend neem oil, pyrethrin, or spinosad on the caterpillars and the thrips. And supposedly mites can be avoided with bare root plants. Not so sure of that, but neem oil, let me just quickly explain, is derived from the neem tree seed and is not harmful to humans or animals. Spinosad is a natural substance that's made by soil bacterium that can be toxic to insects by causing paralysis. So like some of these other things, it might affect the beneficial insects as well as the ones that you're trying to get rid of. So that should be sort of the last resort. And then to keep your berries, I know birds can, you're getting ready to go out there and pluck those blueberries off your plant, and then you go out the next day and there's none on there. It's because the birds have gotten to them. You can try covering with plastic netting or some kind of a cloth cover. So cutworms, these ugly little things, feed at night on the flower buds and foliage. They're 1 to 2 inches long, kind of a grayish brown caterpillar with shiny heads and a sort of a greasy appearance. You can look for them in the soil at the base of the plants. New plants can partly be protected by putting cardboard or plastic collars that are set 3 inches deep in the soil and of course come up above the soil. It might help detract them. So let's talk a minute about propagation. In the early spring, you can cut 4-inch long canes from the past season's growth close to the bottom of the cane with just leaf buds. The top cut should be right above a leaf bud, and the bottom cut should be right below a leaf bud. Stick them in a rooting medium of half sand, half peat, with only the top bud exposed, and cover with clear plastic that you can open every so often, just to let them breathe, or forget the plastic and just keep them moist. And then don't disturb them until the following spring. Or another way of doing it is to build a 1 foot high, 3 foot square foot frame around the bush and fill it with peat and rotted sawdust, mound up around the canes. And then once they start producing new roots, you can cut the canes below the roots and plant them elsewhere. So to summarize, blueberries, the southern high bush is the best variety for growing around here. Plant at least 2 varieties near one another for better productivity. Just, they don't have to be right next to each other, but in your garden. They need sunlight most or all of the day, acidic soil with plenty of organic material and good drainage. Fertilize in the early spring and once again a month later. Water and mulch regularly. No need to prune until at least after 5 years, and be on the lookout for diseases and pests. Questions?
Hi again. So do we have any questions that have come in? I don't see any now. Maybe you've answered everything. Here's one. Thank you.
Isn't that amazing?
How do you treat blueberries whose leaves have turned multicolored?
Oh, multicolored with reddish, maybe some reddish in them. That's sort of a natural thing that they do. Don't treat them with anything.
Okay.
In fact, some blueberries are kind of deciduous, and so the leaves will turn colors in the fall and the winter. So don't worry about them.
Okay, so that's to be expected. Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We have a little bit of time, so this is your chance to find out more about either strawberries or blueberries. Well, we're getting some nice thank yous. So of course, that's always good to hear. But why don't you share your last couple of slides? There was one before this, I think.
Yeah, that's just some of my references. If anybody, these that I use for this particular.
Yeah, those look really great. Maybe.
Golden Gate Gardening is a great book by Pam Pierce, and not just about strawberries and blueberries, but about anything that you want to grow, any kind of vegetable or fruit. I think the Homegrown Berries was another good book, but I've covered most of the material, I think, in this presentation that I got from that.
Okay, I'm pretty sure we have Golden Gate Gardening at the Marin County Free Libraries. Homegrown Berries, I'm not positive about, but we could follow up on that.
Yeah, there's lots of books out there on growing berries, but the Golden Gate Gardening book is excellent for all kinds of vegetable growing, fruit and vegetable.
I popped those in the chat in case anyone was interested.
Okay. So we have Master Gardeners puts out the leaflet on a quarterly basis. It's full of great information, timely information. So if you're interested in getting the leaflet, it's distributed online. Just put your camera up to this QR code, and it will provide all the necessary links to sign you up for it.
That's really helpful. Judy, a listener would like if you could show the slide of how to grow a strawberry again. Would you be willing to flip back to that diagram?
Yes, let me just go to my very last slide, and then we'll go back to that if that's okay.
Perfect.
This slide has our website, our phone number, where our help desk is located in Novato, our email address. And as I said in the very beginning, like if you've got some kind of, if you want to identify a plant, if you've got a disease problem or a pest or anything, you can take a picture. The best thing to do really is to just take a picture and email it to our help desk, and somebody will get back to you within a couple of days with answers for you.
Great resources. I put them in the chat. I also want to say the website has wonderful planting lists and a lot of information just on the website itself. So I'd really suggest people look there as well.
Absolutely. More information than you would ever want or need. It's great.
There's a lot of great stuff there.
Okay, now what was the slide?
It was the slide that the diagram of the strawberry planting. It was so it's up in strawberries, and it showed how to plant, where you showed where the roots are and the mound is, and well, not the mound, but it was a drawing.
The two types of how to plant. Let's see here.
No, not the photograph of the rows, but the actual drawing. It's to your left. If I see it, it's no, it's
the
next. Go down to
this one.
Yes, I believe that's what the it's Lori. I think Lori. Hopefully, this is what you want.
Well, it might be that one, or it might be the planting alternatives.
Well, she said the drawn picture, so I'm assuming
okay.
It's this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the point of the slide was to show that you don't want to bury the crown in the soil, which is this area between the leaves and the roots.
Great. Thank you so much for going back into that.
Yeah.
And unless we have any more questions, I will end this program and the recording and say thank you so much, Judy, for your great informative talk today on growing berries. And thank you to the Master Gardeners for sharing so much wonderful information and being such a strong resource in our community. I feel really grateful.
Okay, and it looks like we had a few more people come on, so I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, we did. We absolutely did. Well, with that, I will say goodbye. Enjoy the sunshine. And thank you so much to everyone for attending. And again, to you, Judy.
Thank you.